Hi, this is David Barrett of bluesharmonica.com, harmonica masterclass workshops, Melody publications, Honor harmonicas, etc., etc. Anyways, I'm here to talk about amplifiers. I've been a big fan of the MegaTone series of amplifiers since their first release, the Wezo 45. Over the last couple years, I've been playing the new series, which is the MegaTone ME18, based on the Masco ME18 that's right over my left shoulder here. And they just came out with a newer model. I do have a previous video on the original release, but I want to take a moment and just talk about some of the new features that make the amplifier even more usable than the first generation of amplifiers. Just to be clear on what I'm using my Honor Marine Band harmonica. This is a key of B flat. The microphone I'm using is it's a small Shure body microphone, but what you care about is the element inside. This is a Shure white label CR from the early 1950s. And the pedal I'm using is one of my favorite pedals. Actually, there's two delay pedals that I like a lot. This is the Dan Electro Dan Echo. Also the Lone Wolf series of delay pedals. I think those are quite nice as well. Anyways, now that you know about my equipment, let's talk a little bit about the amplifier. Alright, let's start with some of the cosmetics. It's got a new green gator and cream Tolex covering, very cool. And get ready for the bling. The front name badge lights up. A three-way off, standby, on power toggle switch that's new for the amplifier as well. That's very handy. The speaker out has always been on the outside of the chassis, but to change the ohm rating is now also on the outside of the chassis, so that makes it even more convenient than the first model. And the monitor. This was a monitor that I designed that MegaTone amplifiers made. And the idea is, instead of having a whole bunch of cabinets behind you where it's sending sound to your back, is to use a monitor design to be in front of you, just like a monitor does, basically, where you can place it anywhere that you wish to place it on the bandstand. It's very, very common that we have an amplifier setup issue. You know, you get to the gig, especially if you're late to the gig, and you just got to place your harp amp wherever it's convenient. And the two rules of thumb of getting the amplifier at least 2 milk crates high or on a chair, basically sending sound to your ears instead of the back of your kneecaps, right? And also getting away from the amplifier. Those are the two most important elements of hearing your amplifier on the bandstand, is getting it off the stage and getting away from it. Sometimes actually the amp sounds good on the stage if the stage is constructed in a certain way. You can imagine a hollow stage actually helping to give you a little bit of extra bass. But generally speaking, in most situations, get the amp off the floor, get away from the amplifier 5, 10, 15 feet. But we're not always able to do that. So to have a monitor that you can place anywhere on the bandstand, or sometimes I'll even, if it's a short stage, I'll put the monitor in front of the stage. That way it's shooting up to my ears, and again it's off of the stage, which sometimes can be very small and cluttered. Anyways, on this monitor you also see the matching green gator and cream Tolex, as well as new for this year, which is a volume control, which allows you to control the volume of your monitor separately from your amplifier. To a certain degree, it's not a big deal because you can of course just turn your amplifier down and it'll turn the amplifier and the monitor down at the same time. But there are times I personally prefer to have the amp a little bit louder behind me and the monitor a little bit softer in front of me, so that it's sending just you're getting a full surround sound of your harmonica sound on the bandstand. For speaker size, this amplifier has two 10-inch speakers. You can get a 10 and a 12 if you wish, a single 10, or you can get a compact cabinet also with a single 10, and it really has a very small footprint. There's also an option of just buying the head if you wish, if you want to create your own combination of head and speakers. And it wouldn't be uncommon to see someone use a MegaTone head right into the monitor. The monitor is just right in front of them on the bandstand, and that creates the backline, basically the way they're able to hear themselves on the bandstand. You might ask, well then how do they mic it into the house? You go ahead and put the mic right in front of the monitor speaker. So there's a lot of ways to skin that cat, you know? Now, as it goes for the type of speakers, they've changed over to the Jensen Jet Tornadoes. And then, of course, it goes to their custom tenderizing process. I've actually purchased a quad of Jensen Jets and experimented with those speakers along with quite a few other speakers, and found those really to be in my opinion at the moment, the best series of speakers, or at least of the ones I've tried in the market today, once they've been tenderized by MegaTone amplifiers. So for example, if you have a basement, I found that if you take two Jensen Jet Tornadoes and replace those speakers, it can take your early 90s Bassman or even your LTD, which has the less desirable, at least for harmonica players, Jensen P10R reissues. You take out the two bottom ones and put those two tenderized jets in there, and it really turns it into a monster of an amplifier. So these speakers sound really great. Now getting to the biggest change of this amplifier that really brings it into the next realm of usability, which are its different tone controls. They now use in the #1 input preamp tube a 6BL8, which is a vintage tube. It's no longer made, but they're so plentiful that it's not really an issue. MegaTone Amplifiers now provides this little kit that you can purchase that will screw into the inside cabinet of your amplifier. You can buy it this way if you want, or you can buy it after the fact like I did. And they provide a complete complement of replacement tubes and circuit breakers, or fuses, excuse me. So the great thing is that you can go to whatever, you're doing a studio recording or go to a live show, and if a tube goes or if a fuse goes, that you have a backup. I think that's a wonderful idea, and that was a very innovative way of keeping your tubes and these fuses with your amplifier. So anyways, that's a kit available for purchase separately or with a new amp if you buy it. Let me now go into the main changes of this new model. And the big feature now is that you have much more control over tonal range. This amplifier, compared to the previous iterations of the MegaTone amplifiers made for harmonica, can get much cleaner if you want it. I'm actually able to dial it in, and I'm going to show you this as the first way. I'm able to dial in this amp to sound identical to my basements. And I own 3 basements, and this amplifier is able to get exactly the same tone as my basements. And the first setting would have the tone in the pad all the way up, and then you turn your volume to liking. And I think it sounds pretty good. Once you reach that #4 setting on the volume, it really gives you that basement-like tone. So let me play that for a moment. Now if you bring the tone in the up position, and I still like to have it all the way up because it gives a nice treble bite, I tend to turn the pad down a little bit. Now you're getting something that's a little bit more saturated, still very round and toneful, not too distorted, but I find this to be a really good middle ground for your sound. Let me give you an example of that as well. And the last settings with the tone knob in the up position, just like we just did, and also the volume knob in the up position. And now the amplifier gets much more distorted, and it really is reminiscent of those early 1950 amplifiers where you can get a very saturated sound. Let me give you an example of that as well. And here's the chromatic harmonica on its most distorted setting, which is the tone up and the volume up. Then a G harmonica, which is what you'd use if you were blowing chromatic and switching back and forth. Anyways, I find that to be very useful. I really like the basement sound, or a more transparent sound for some songs that I play. Some songs just don't call for a really overdriven sound. In that middle position with the tone knob up, I tend to find myself playing this amplifier that way most of the time. And then when I play chromatic especially, I like to have a little bit more distortion, or if I'm really playing an early 1950s classic Chicago sound, it's nice to have a little bit more distortion with having the tone knob and the volume knob in that up position. And as a modern day player, to be able to have a small package with two 10-inch speakers that creates all the volume you would need on the bandstand, and then if that's still not enough, say you play with an excessively loud band, you have that option of the monitor. I actually play with the monitor quite often just because I'm not necessarily looking to get a lot louder as I'm trying to surround myself with my sound. I actually like to, it's kind of the principle of playing with two bassements. It's not so much that you're really pushing a lot more air, it's so that you don't have to have your basement at this, this ear splitting, at the very edge of its possible range and right at the range of feedback. The idea is if you have two basements chained together, you can bring the volume down on both of those and get into a more toneful range, but still be able to hear yourself well and still provide a nice warm sound for the first 10 rows of the audience. And that's the same idea of using the MegaTone amplifier with the monitor. The idea is that you don't have to have the amplifier at a really, really loud volume if you're playing with a real loud band, or even just a normal band. I like to have it at actually a fairly mellow volume. A lot of players are kind of surprised when they play through my rig. When I unplug the monitor, then I plug the monitor back in, it's not necessarily a really overpowering sound, it's just covers the whole bandstand. It just kind of saturates the bandstand with your sound, and it's a very musical effect, opposed to really punching the first 10 rows of audience in the face with this real powerful sound. Anyways, it's just different perspectives. And remember that feedback is directly related to distortion. So the more distortion you use, the more feedback prone you are. So sometimes the volume is not so much an issue. You can go ahead and bring up the distortion quite a bit. Or you'll want to have, like the setting 1 that I showed you, something that is as clean as possible so that you can get as much volume on the bandstand as well. Anyways, the idea is that you have a lot of options. Check out megatoneamps.com. They've got quite a few different models of amplifiers. They all sound wonderful. Just think about which one works best for your situation. Anyways, feel free to contact me at bluesharmonica.com. There's a portion on the forum that says Ask Instructor Dave Barrett questions. I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. I do not get paid for this. I'm happy to support people who do great things for the harmonica community, and Dale and Mike at MegaTone Amplifiers really do that. Anyways, always fun talking to you. I'll play a little bit out for you.